This is Real Learning with Real People. These conversations are with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. With minimum amounts of editing and maximum authenticity, we hope to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning that's based on their life experiences. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and other guests have been chosen because they have meaningful lessons to teach, and I want to make sure they have the platform to share them with the world. The language in these videos is sometimes mature, as I'm always encouraging guests to just be themselves. This is all part of making sure that we do our best to give you content that is both authentic and effective, and that you truly feel like you can utilize the real learning and connect with these real people. This week's guest is our third Aussie in a row and is low-key living a highly interesting life. So low-key that even he doesn't know how interesting he is. Ric Hooper is a business consultant who has worked with a variety of businesses all around the world, primarily in the agrochemical industry. Now, I met Ric early this year when he came to Canada to watch his daughter play on the university basketball team that I was coaching with. I instantly felt as though Ric had had life experiences that people needed to hear and that would impact others positively. He's so humble but has excellent learnings from a life of tests and hurdles that he's grown through. Even before coming on the show, he sent me his bio and right away had some great insight in it with a line that I immediately wrote down, which was, ultimately, you only answer to yourself. That's when I knew how good this conversation would be. With that, here's Ric. Hi Ric, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Ken.
Good to hear. I like to dive right in. I don't really like to beat around the bush too much once we get into here, and it's early morning where you are, so I'll wake you up with the hard hitting stuff early.
Okay, that sounds good.
First things first, I like to find out as much as possible about how you grew up and what built your framework essentially for life. How many siblings, what your parents were like, what they did, what the house was like, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm currently still based in Perth, although I've travelled a lot around, so Perth in Australia. And every few years we travelled to a different country town and moved around a lot. So it's a fairly transient family. I was just with my father's work. And growing up, we're a fairly close family. I've got an older brother and a younger sister, so there's five of us. I guess it made us be self-sufficient in a way as a family. And we spent a lot of time in country Western Australia, so fairly remote areas. Very sporting minded as a family growing up, always involved in sport, myself and my brother and sister and dad and mum. So a lot of it was Australian rules football, swimming as well, and we played everything else in between. So they were our main sports, but we played cricket. You may not be familiar with some of those sports in Canada, but
yeah.
And then so growing up, then we moved back to Perth when I was about 12, and then which is the capital city of Western Australia. And I completed high school here in Perth, and then my mum divorced. Mum moved to Sydney, which is the other side of the country in the East Coast, when I was about 13. So then it was probably my dad, my brother, and myself growing up really as three mates. And so Dad was a very positive influence, but he very relaxed, and he was almost like a whatever happens, laissez-faire. Wasn't very, I don't know if it's a weakness, but he wasn't very strong on guidance and direction. It was more, however it'll be sort of thing. And he was a very relaxed approach. But Mum and Dad getting divorced was actually probably a good thing, I think, as an upbringing, because it got rid of any sort of tension in the family, and it was almost, we were growing up as three mates, and primarily around sport and having a bit of fun and fishing and those sort of things on the weekends, and spent a lot of time doing that. So I had a close bond with, and now Mum and Dad still divorced, but Mum's back in Perth, and the family has been fairly harmonious for the last 20 years, 30 years.
Cool. That's
yeah.
I've had a few people on the show who have parents who are divorced, probably not around the rate of the world, but it actually sounds like it was a pretty positive experience overall for you from the sound of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's one of those things, and a lot of other experiences in life at the time seemed like this is devastating or this is bad, and it turns out it's a positive, because of the way things happen, and that's one of them. Yeah. I don't know what else to tell you about growing up. Things that try and influence my life. I guess we were always outdoors type people. and and a lot of our activities revolved around recreation and sport.
So before I dive too deep into the sport aspect of it, I ask the same questions. There's a couple questions I ask in every conversation to everybody, and the first one is, if you had to describe them in one word, what would be the word that you would use to describe your parents? Mom first.
Mum, fairly disciplined.
Okay.
And it's not in a disciplinarian way. She's just fairly structured to what she does. She's very sort of process, goal orientated, fairly driven. Particularly early on in her life, she worked as a midwife, and then at the same time was raising us children and that. And then my dad, probably his word would be relaxed. He was that was probably his one word. Yeah.
Very sounds very like yin yang.
Yeah, it was, and it's probably in a way why they're attracted to each other, in a way why it didn't work. But they were still married, I think, 17 years or something like that. So,
yeah, that's interesting. We have a lot of people on the show who their parents are together, been together their whole lives, and they have that same dynamic, like you said, why they were maybe originally attracted to each other, where they really balance. And then there's the other side where they're still together, but they're the exact same, and they've been butting heads for 30 or 40 years. So it continues to be interesting to me how those people's children then end up turning out.
Well, it's funny, yeah. I think even myself and my wife, I'm more the introvert, she's more the extrovert, and more spontaneous and gregarious sort of personalities her, and I'm, we complement each other being different. So. And that's work. We've been married now 25 years. So,
yeah, that's interesting. And I wonder, so when you bring that into different contexts, so we can segue this into some sport, but I have a feeling it's probably going to segue into some other things as well. I would imagine that you probably, and the little bit of conversation that you and I have been able to have previous, you really seem to have adopted your dad's attitude, I guess, or perspective in terms of being relaxed, or do you still have a little bit of mum in you?
Yeah, a bit of both. It's funny, things you read, you hear about people that there's a common cliche that dad's an alcoholic, so the son turns out an alcoholic because of his dad, and the other one might turn out doesn't drink because of his dad. And it's the same thing. So some parts of dad I've gone the other way with, and my dad was I don't think he was really good with money. He used to waste a lot of money and bet heavily and those sort of things, and that was one of the issues. But it was never. I'm pretty good with finance and discipline and those sort of things. So parts of dad, though, the relaxed part, I think I'd take that approach. He was always very positive and sort of glass half full. I try and be that all the time where I can. And then there's other parts, though. Yeah, you try and see both sides and what's the good, and try and model yourself on those aspects, if you like. And so I think I've picked up some of mum's disciplines, ways about things, but also hopefully kept some of dad's good qualities as well. So yeah.
Do you, if I had a continuum where on one end is somebody who gets easily really high and easily really low, so really excited when things are going well, or really down when things are going poorly, would you fall on that end where it's extremes, or do you fall maybe on the other end of the continuum where you're kind of steady Eddie the whole time, or maybe somewhere in between?
Yeah, more steady, and I don't have the wild extremes of sort of, not so happiness, because I get happy, but I don't have the wild extremes. You might imagine I don't get the depression either, which is fortunate. So yeah. And I've always tried to be a bit balanced with in life and sport and everything in general. And I don't know if that's necessary if you to be. It's so interesting, you as a coach too, because I've sort of grappled with this a bit, because you see some sportsmen, to be the best they can, they almost have to be completely obsessive about it. And the other aspects of their life, whether it be family or social or economic, doesn't matter, it can be in chaos, but they're so single focused, almost like OCD, to try and be successful. And for some, that's maybe what they need to be successful. And maybe there's a trade-off by trying to be balanced, not getting that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would. We do a lot of what we do with our company is based on Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
And many people don't know this, but Maslow never actually drew a pyramid. That
Okay.
came along after the fact. Somebody
Yeah.
else added that in, and
Yeah.
we know that to be true in the sense that when we when we have needs, it's not like sometime as a child our need for safety or food gets fulfilled and then we never go back to feeling the need to satisfy that at a higher level again. We go in and out throughout our
Yeah.
lives, almost like a wave of those needs, and it's definitely not in that pyramid structure. And then we really try and teach that in conjunction with Carl Jung's self-actualization and
Hmm.
understanding that it's almost a ping pong like game where at sometimes you're going to be on the side of the court where you're trying to fulfill needs and assess those needs, and at other times you're going to be on the other side where you're really able to be one with yourself and present and really start being able to figure out who you are. And in the context of your question, I would say that there is such thing as too much of a good thing regardless of what it is. And when you are in those extreme highs and those low lows, or as you put it, in those obsessive kind of places, whether it's for a moment or for long periods, I think that you're spending a lot more time, and I don't mean you, I mean
Mm.
theoretically
Generally.
anyone, you end up spending a lot more time on the Maslow side of the ping pong table, where you're so focused on that one thing. It's so narrow, tunnel
Hmm.
visioned, that anytime you're not focused on that, you're just focusing on fulfilling needs. You're just focusing on satisfying your physical safety, your food, your need for food, your need for sleep, and that kind of thing. And it becomes very challenging to pursue self-actualization or to try and be present and try to really connect with
Hmm.
yourself. So I don't know that I could say that that it's wrong. I don't think that would be the verbiage I would put on it, but I would say that ensuring that the ping pong ball is continuing to bounce back and forth as much as possible is really the key thing that we try and preach, I guess, if for lack of a better word.
That makes a bit of sense. But I can understand that because, and that helps me now. The fact that you don't stay there, it's not a hierarchy. You don't progress from one to the other, and you do jump different phases of your life from one to the other. And it might be times in your life when sport is your main thing and become obsessive about it, and then things move on. It might be out of season, and you're focusing more. And even throughout life, I think um, I found too that your priorities when you're younger might be more around sporting when
Mm.
when you're in that sort of window, and then it might become, and then you're starting an early career, it might be more around finance, definitely for me anyway, trying to get enough money, and then later on in life becomes more family and then health, and those are sort of things that does change throughout life.
Yeah, and I think in again, it's just my opinion. Haven't had a chance to do massive amounts of research on professional
Yeah.
athletes or anything like that, but when you are paying attention to really trying to connect with yourself, with the planet, with really true and honest connection with the people around you at a young age, and you're in something like sport for the quote unquote right reasons. um, and what I mean by that is if there's a 13 or 14-year old who's playing cricket, say, and his only focus is not getting embarrassed, not messing up, not making mistakes, not getting yelled at, he's really on that Maslow side, really trying to just satisfy his needs and protect himself.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's probably never going to get very good.
Yeah.
He'll probably quit in all likelihood. Whereas if he really has, or she has, a really strong understanding of, I'm here to just get better and I'm here to put forth effort and I'm here to connect with other people and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do believe that those are the people that end up succeeding, not just in sport, but as an example in sport at a much higher rate than the ones that are just there trying to survive every day.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. And I think that just myself, sporting was always about having fun
Mm-hmm.
and enjoying it, and then you got through sport, you probably got rewarded through trophies and premierships and those sort of things, and then it becomes perpetuating, and you want more of it and more of it, and then you train a bit harder, and then as you have more success, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Well, and most people who watch this or listen to this won't know this already, but I've had the privilege of coaching your daughter, and I would say that she's very much on that side, even at the high level she's at now, where she
Mhm.
really does do it to enjoy it, but it's not mutually exclusive. And what I mean by that is it's not like she's competing and training and participating because she just wants to enjoy it and that's it. She wants to win too, and those
Yeah,
things can actually come together. But
yeah,
I don't know if you found this, but I've noticed that many people, coaches, teachers included, athletes, people in business, the enjoyment of the craft in their head doesn't connect with also performing at a high level.
yeah. True. I think that's right. Because I, I I think even in business, you enjoy the cut and trust of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I don't think I don't know if you're necessarily thinking about this as a high level performance or not. You're just trying to do the best you can day by day, and you might enjoy it, but you're not. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how I can make the connection there, but I just yeah, I don't necessarily think they're the same thing anyway.
I can maybe put my lens on it a little bit for you and see if that connects any dots. And that's that
Yeah,
uh, we have a concept that we teach called the theory of performance relativity, and it's that performance is not and therefore high performance is not something that everybody has as like an ultimate peak to reach.
hmm,
It's something that every individual has in any given minute, hour, day, week, month, year,
yeah,
lifetime, etc.
yeah,
And when I look at it that way, it becomes a little bit easier to see how enjoyment and success can go together
yeah,
if I'm just looking at it relative to myself, which at the end of it all is really all we've got, right?
yeah,
The trophies are important and there's reason why they exist, and I believe strongly in them. But if we look at it in terms of performance and high performance relative to me, how am I doing as a mom, as a dad, as a brother, a sister, or just for myself as an athlete or myself as a colleague or employee, that
yeah,
kind of thing. I think it becomes a little bit easier then to figure out ways that my enjoyment and my winning or my success or my high performance can actually go together.
yeah. I think you're right. If you chunk it down like that and you think of it step by step, it's an easier approach. It makes more sense.
Yeah, I'm curious if you've ever had, whether it's in that exact lens or not, if you've ever had lessons from your sport, your time in sport, regardless of the sport, because you participate in both individual and team,
Yeah.
um, kind of really come back now later on in life, and you're able to reflect and see where those connections are made.
I think with sports, particularly with team sport, your people skills you develop and you have a different relationship with people you play sport with. I think over time you develop a lot more with team sports. You've probably leadership skills are one of the things you take forward into business and life that you develop through a sporting field initially. Even things like it might be public speaking and those things that develop. The interpersonal skills, another thing. Um, Probably the disciplines of sport too, the training side of things, and that's something you carry forward in life, even in trying to be healthy. You know, it might be an exercise regime or something you do as part of a routine that you carry forward that you developed in the sporting way. And you know that to be successful, you need to put the hard work in, and probably a fairly hard working approach to things, and as well, to sometimes just needs to be a certain amount of grunt work to get the job done, whether it be sport or life, and you carry those things through. So there's things like that, I guess, those elements.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think they're the key things for me.
Yeah. If you don't want to answer this next question, that's totally fine. But I'm curious, can you kind of recall one of the more challenging things you've experienced in life, whatever might come to mind, maybe the most challenging thing? And you don't need to go into too much detail on that, or go into as much as you'd like. But when you went through that very challenging time, what tools did you access to get over or through that?
I've always thought one of the most challenging times, and this probably won't be the answer you're looking for, was when our second child was born and we just moved to the country and we had very little sort of friends or family around us. We were sort of 3 or 4 hours drive from Perth.
Mm-hmm.
And he had colic and reflux, and I was trying to balance a new job with my wife and the new baby, and it was probably because he was in pain, he was crying, almost continually for probably the first 5 months, and just complete sleep deprivation and so on. I'm not sure what tools there is or what advice you can. You just have to sort of grind through it, and it was a lot of hard work, and that was really tiring. That was probably the hardest things, was being a young parent. It's not related to sport or business or anything like that. It was just, but that was a really tough period in our life, and my wife and I was very supportive of one another. I'm trying to think of the tools you rely on, but it was pushing through, perseverance, and knowing that it's going to get better with time, because there was nothing physically other than his body hadn't developed enough, and so he was going through that painful period, still growing as a baby. That was just a tough period in our life. There's other little things like sporting wise where you might get dropped from a team, and then this happened with me when I was playing football, Australian football, when I was playing Colts for a major club here, and I didn't make the 1 year. They didn't want us halfway through. It wasn't working out. I wasn't playing regularly, and told to leave. And then I did, and went back and played sort of local football and enjoyed that. And then the following year went back again, and it was a lot easier for us. And I sort of become a good player of that team, and we ended up and I was a key part of that. And we went on and won a premiership there in that division, and then went on and played the next level up and the level up again, which was the highest level in WA. So, but it was easy to could have probably given the game away or thrown it or not gone back to it. But that sort of perseverance and wanting to get better and improve and work a bit harder and go back and try again. So, there are a couple of things. One from sport, I guess, and from family.
Well, I think you actually, first of all, the example was great, because I think it comes to something that's very relevant right now, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But I also think that that first example of managing the time with just unimaginable fatigue, unimaginable to me because I don't have kids.
Can't be.
And you make it sound so appealing that it might take a little longer before I do. But the word that you said that I think actually connects right back to the example you gave on the team side was that support aspect. With the baby, you have the support with your wife, and with the team, obviously you've got a team. You have those people around you, and it sounds like in both instances it became this kind of when you're going through hell, keep going kind of moment. But something that made it easier was a support network around you.
Yeah, probably. I think the resilience is of it as well. Support was probably my wife and I, and it was more just knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel and not getting too down in the moment, and just going through it, and just know that you just got to get through day by day, breaking it down, and it'll get better. And that was probably the first example. And the sporting one, yeah, there was support around us, but definitely with coaching and other players and people you look inspirational with, and training at home. And with my brother was also heavily involved in sports. So my brother, my dad, and I, like we said, as we grew up, continually we were down the park every afternoon kicking the football and that sort of stuff. So it was part of your life. And then we probably, I don't know if we trained particularly hard, trained harder or whatever. I know I did do my best, and then went back, and I think it was support network was important, particularly in the sporting field.
Yeah, that's interesting to me too. What do you think you gained from having a brother that was, like you said, a close friend as much as he was a brother, and then right there with you in some of those experiences?
Yeah, well, my brother Steve, he was a better footballer than I was, and he was probably more inspirational for me as a younger brother. Always look up to your older brother, but we would compete. And growing up, whether it be swimming or football, often in the country there would be age groups, might be combined age groups. So he was always the best when we were combined age groups. And then the years that we'd go into individual age groups, I would sort of be the best, and he would be the best in his. And that was, and so he was an inspiration for us for swimming and football growing up, and then also like a best mate. So we used to train together, and it wasn't training; it was more just practice ourselves, whether it be down the cricket nets after school or down a football field having a kick, or down a local pool or whatever it was. So we would knock about together as mates, but also have similar interests. So, and then even and with my dad growing up, and my mum was also heavily involved in swimming and those sports. So, yeah, it gave me someone. It sort of even I didn't really need an off button for some. I know some sportsmen do, but we sort of. I remember looking back, it was all the time. We were sort of immersed in sport, and but that's what we love doing. And probably like you said, going back to your thoughts before, was doing it for the right reasons, because the enjoyment of it. We want to get better at what we're doing, and we love doing it.
Yeah, that idea of not necessarily calling it training, but really almost like playing to get better.
Yeah,
A little bit different when you think about it in that context. And a lot of people that get good at stuff tend to spend a lot of time playing as they're
yeah,
training, not just
yeah.
really focused. It's a little bit looser, a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I think when you're younger, definitely. I remember this too. When you're really fit too, going for a run is not a big deal. Like as you get older, going and doing a heap of exercise, and you think, oh God, and your body aches and things are sore. But when you're young, it's just what you do, I think. And we used to love going and getting involved in sport. And it wasn't something you actually think about. I'm going to have to do a heap of work here. You just did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I literally just went through that experience today where I talked myself out of a run because
yeah,
of some soreness in my hip or whatever like
yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
came up
Easy to
right
do.
before I had to go for the run.
Yeah.
I guess if it makes it pretty easy then to kind of pivot, because now in the business world, you you have a lot more kind of unique experiences, partly because of travel and partly because of other things. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, like through business, I was very much in. It's one of the things my dad. I'll go back a step. One of the things my dad instructed us to do, even though he was probably the last person to expect to come from, because he was such a relaxed personality. Like I said, it was almost like a laissez-faire approach to life. He told us about goal setting one day when I was about 12 or 13, and write down some of the things you want to achieve. And I do remember doing. I've still got the bit of paper, and one of the couple of the key things were things like travel. I wanted a job that involved travel, because we didn't even maybe that goes back to our roots traveling around the country growing up. So I ended up I had a job. I was working in the country as a branch manager in one of the stores, and there was an amalgamation of two companies and mergers, and I didn't get the job I wanted. But as a result, I ended up getting a better job, a bigger job running WA for the state. And then from there progressed to a national role. And I was in the agriculture industry. And from that, I guess, had I got the role in Esperance when I was the branch manager, I might have stayed there for 10 years, and and it's a lovely place to live, might have been my career. But I did want to travel. And through work and through business, I was able to, I've traveled to 20 odd countries around the world, and with work, and predominantly sourcing ag chemicals and those sort of things, but also dealing with a lot of people and businesses, and you're getting a feel of their culture and how they do things in each of those countries. And that's an invaluable experience, and how business operates and the different protocols and cultures. And that's something I've loved doing all my life with work. It's been a real privilege to do.
Do you get your energy from other people?
Bit of both. I'm not sort of an introvert. I am to a point. I still enjoy. I enjoy interaction with other people. I enjoy people watching. I enjoy sharing a meal and discussing life and what they do and what they do with their, different, particularly people from different cultures. And I've got bit to learn from. I try and pick their brains of how they do things and how their culture operates and how business operates and what they're thinking and what they're. So I I do love that aspect of people. But I'd probably get my energy, so a bit of both. I get my energy from other people, but I also like my own time and own space as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, the labels of introvert and extrovert are getting harder and harder to actually put on people, I find.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the most famous introverts in the world is Anderson Cooper, the anchor for CNN, and
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
he's he self-identifies as an introvert all the time, but his job is extremely extroverted.
Yeah.
Less so now. I think he spends more time in the studio than he used to, but in his early days at CNN, he was out there. He's talked to people. He's reporting sometimes in natural disaster and horrible situations or great situations. He's interacting with hundreds of people all the time, but
Yeah.
also calls himself one of the most introverted people he knows.
So that's funny. So even with business, I know that to be good at what I need to do, I need to be, so might be example, might be public speaking and getting out there and presenting a strategy or direction on something or conveying a message of what's going on. And so it's just what you need to do. And you sort of, you develop skills around that because what part of your job is and what you want to get to in your career. And so I enjoy going out for dinner all the time, a lot of the times with different, particularly when I'm with overseas customers or suppliers, whatever it is, just that interaction. I enjoy that over dinner, and I do. But there's other times I just really like my own personal space, and sometimes on weekends I've been travelling for a couple of weeks, and I come home and my wife has probably organised the social side of things, and I'm just happy staying at home and watching TV and having an early night because I just want that normality back, I think, too.
It's like you hit a threshold.
Yeah, hit a threshold. You've had enough, and the people and the niceties and pleasantries, and you just want to just relax and be yourself and do nothing for a day or so, and catch up on other stuff. Might be simple stuff like gardening and going for walks or that type of thing, as opposed to being out and being social, and being on stage and presenting all the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because really by public speaking, you're conquering, well, maybe not conquering for you, but you're actually doing the number one fear on the planet, which is public speaking.
Yeah.
Do you, because I also, I've been, and I don't really know fully where my public speaking, I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I do it quite a bit for my job, and I do it quite a bit. And I've done it quite a bit for a long time, and I've never felt nervous or uncomfortable in that setting, but the majority of people do.
Yeah.
How do you think you developed that ability or that skill?
Well, this is something that I don't think I was ever comfortable with, but I knew that in life, it's something you need to do particularly if you want to be a leader and successful. I think anyway, it's one of the skills in our industry you'd need to do, and that was maybe saying with sport. You get talking with people, and then different awards and presentation nights, and more exposure you get through sport, and then I think anyway that then grew on to my business side of things where might be running a small team and then bigger teams and then bigger strategies and things. So it's something that I realised probably early on you need to be good at. So I started practicing it. And then when opportunities to speak, I wouldn't shy away from it. I would jump in and try and do it until the point where you do it so often, it's not something that you become overly nervous about. I think a little bit of nerves isn't a bad thing, but it's something you're quite comfortable with, and it's what you do all the time. Then it becomes what your job is. So that part of it, I think it's something I grew into a bit, knew I had to be good at it and practiced it a lot. And I think even with my kids, when they were growing up, when they were little, I made them do presentation times, we used to call it, where they'd get up and have to talk impromptu about things for, a couple of minutes about any subject, and we would, and they would have to get up in front of just the family. And, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, my presentation is about, and they would do this spiel and talk about whatever it was. And to the point now where I've got one of my kids is a performer in Shanghai, in Disneyland. My daughter's, and my other son, none of the three have any fears of public speaking. They're all happy to talk. So I think and they all talked about that. They remember doing a lot of it from the age of about, 3 or 4 until they were about 10. And no problems doing it now. Yeah. And it was also entertaining for us to listen to them talk about anything and their funny insights on life. And that was more just, it was just more of an interaction with the kids as well.
Yeah, it really builds that concept too of continuing to pursue the things that maybe you're fearful of or cause a little bit of pain, like emotional pain or threat, I guess.
The other things, just with kids too, I've also tried to instill in them. We talk about sport and discipline. I've also tried to exercise and and being healthy, and they all got a healthy appetite for training by themselves as well as in teams. So they're all very fit, and they all do, and exercise is a big part of their life too.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. I want to talk about an aspect of your job that I think is another piece that many people struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And that's the fact that because you're interacting and you're working with different people from different cultures and having to meet new people, you kind of touched on this, that you have almost like the James Bond of communication, where you have Liam Neeson in Taken is what I'm thinking of, where you have a very particular set of skills, and you can connect with people, whether you've known them for a long time, or whether it's the first time you're meeting them, or whether it's the first time you're meeting them and they come from a background that's nothing like yours. What's your approach to meeting someone and being able to authentically show up and connect with them?
Yeah. Saying some of that's a bit innate, I think, too. You do meet people, and some can be over the top, some can be overly quiet, and you don't have any connection there. I try and gauge the person I'm interacting with and what they're like a little bit as well, and then adjusting your style to suit. Like someone who's overly gregarious, they're going to take over the conversation and dominate and talk about themselves anyway. And you may let the conversation go, and that happen, and they talk about themselves a lot, and you still enjoy that. I enjoy that interaction. People are like that. And I enjoy people who are quiet and drawing out of them through asking sort of probing questions about what they do and what their life's like, and what sort of people they're like, and their culture, and so I've always been probably a good listener rather than a talker as well. And I think you learn a lot by asking the right questions more than you do by talking. So for me, I like to think I sort of interact starting off by more not sort of talking myself, but asking questions about them, and then through that conversation develops, and we have common stories and interests. And I think overseas, when talking to people from different cultures, I find it really fascinating anyway. So we share experiences, how they do things, or it might be something as simple as having dinner with a group of, say, Chinese people and their customs, tradition around having dinner, and we relate it to how we do it in Australia and talk about school and family and all sorts of things. So it's probably something because you have a natural interest in it. But I think if I had to sum it up, it's probably asking the right questions, Ken.
Yeah. And the theme of your answers is now becoming that you think you've only said a small piece, but you've actually said quite a bit. And you essentially just described why I started this entire show, which is that I wanted to get more of that, and I wanted people to be able to access some of the stuff that comes as a byproduct of that. And the way I see it a lot of times is, and my younger sister actually introduced me to this concept, and it's not hers, and it's used widely, but I hadn't really thought of it in this way before. And I can't remember if you and I talked about this before, but she manages a very serious eating disorder. So she's been in treatment, various treatments, very high level. She was at multiple intervals, very, very sick. And one of the things she introduced me that she learned from there, and she's doing better now, just so that nobody thinks that I'm leading somewhere really, really sad here. Yeah. She's doing quite a bit better now, but she taught me the concept of allowing space for the other person or the other people in conversation. And it's a skill that I constantly practice on here. And because of that, it's a skill, like I'm kind of violating it right now. But really making sure that your thoughts and your wants and your feelings come through when you're talking to someone, and combining that, like you said, with a genuine curiosity about what the other person has to say, not listening to them thinking about what you're going to respond with, or as I put it a lot of times with the athletes that I work with, are you trying to win the conversation, or are you actually trying to get something out of it? Because if you're trying to win, you're not going to hear anything. And as coaches and probably as parents, that's something that happens a lot, where you're trying to teach something, but they're just trying to be right.
And you hear it socially in sport and everywhere, someone who, they're not listening to you because they've got their own thoughts they want to talk about in their head, and almost like you need to let the space for conversation so you can get your point across. Otherwise, it's not going to go in. The same as I think in business where you're talking to someone and you've probably had this feeling where you walk away and you know that they didn't quite understand or didn't get it, or they're not going to commit to what's something you asked them to commit to. And I think if you've got the time, then it's really important when you're having that conversation, you feel they've closed up, is to ask and try and understand why they've closed up. But otherwise, you'll never get your point or your message, or you never get the action you want as a result of the meeting. And you can see sometimes you feel it where it's been a good meeting because you know that everyone's on the same page, you've understood. Other times, you know, it's just they didn't go that well, they weren't receptive for whatever reason, and you couldn't draw it out of them why, and you couldn't try and get on the same page.
Yeah, and it brings up an interesting thought for me, which is that we oftentimes now when we're doing our work with businesses, usually we're brought in by a single entity, or whether it's a department or a person who believes in the work that we do, but rarely is the buy-in to what we're bringing very high across the people that we're working with, because let's say it's a director or a manager who's brought us in. The 20 or 30 people that report to them, who we're actually consulting with and teaching and trying to aid with their performance, they just see a relatively young business with relatively young facilitators who, yeah, he's a basketball coach with a background in psychology, but why, how is this possibly going to help? And so when we give stuff that we know is impactful, and we've got data and we've anecdotally seen that it creates change, I couldn't even give you a specific number. And I'm actually going to make a note that I need to start statting this when we're doing it. For how many people, as I'm talking about the concept that could very well change their day-to-day the biggest, are not paying attention, or they're already starting to talk to rebut what I'm saying, because they've already made that judgment at the beginning and they're just not interested in learning.
I was on the receiving end of that. We had consultants coming in different times from what might have been working, and it might have been the CEO's organised a team to come through. And I really feel that the key thing, and you've said it, but is the understanding why you're doing it. Otherwise, the group won't be receptive, and they need to be. If you have on the other side of the coin, if you have consultants and come into business, the people who are the key people you want to talk to about whatever change. I've seen it happen where if they don't get the why and what's the outcome and why it's important to go through the process, they shut up from the start. So yeah, I've seen that happen.
Yeah, I would say too that there's on the business side, at least in our experience, as we continue to kind of grow as a startup company and start doing more and more of that, we see a massive amount of benefit from the pieces that we were just talking about before, which is a genuine curiosity. We start every course or workshop or whatever it is we're delivering with a genuine curiosity and a genuine amount of learning about what it is that the people that we're working with do. And that's not that's not to say that we're trying to come in and understand at their level, but the first step for us is always, tell me about your day to day. And it can sometimes be a half day or a full day where I'm genuinely bopping around in an office building or in an industrial building and being like, well, what's that thing? It's literally like hours of me saying, well, what's that do? What's that person doing? Why are they? And it's just, it's non-judgmental. It's not me trying to understand it better or tell them how to do it. And once they see that, it's usually very positive. But it's genuinely just like, if I'm going to tell you how to use my stuff to better this, I can't do it from a boardroom where I have no idea what goes on downstairs. So I think that creates a little bit of that, that little bit of, it's almost like genuine listening, even though I'm talking. Like it's creating a situation where I have something to listen to.
And even sometimes someone coming in fresh and questioning why you do something, often it's because that's just the way it's been done. That's the protocol, and then hopefully the right sort of someone's receptive enough to actually agree with you. Hang on, it's a good point. Why are we doing that? We could be doing it a different way.
We often talk about how the question, if you think that the answer is going to be because it's how it's always been done, you really need to ask the question. because there
Yeah,
has to be a better answer than that,
yeah,
or you need to change it.
yeah. Good point.
Um, I think an interesting thing on that, just again, like I mentioned, like we're growing up as business consultants and using psychology in the sport world to interact with people who otherwise don't really touch those places very often or at all. So it's really this kind of fun and unique and super challenging but exciting experience of you have no idea that you want this. When I tell you about it, you might still not want it. And then and then when I show you it and you experience it a little bit for yourself, there's going to be some fireworks that start to go off, some light bulbs turn on, and you enjoy it.
Yeah.
I would imagine that you have some of those moments as well.
Yeah, I guess there is. I think, and particularly when in periods of change, right? And we're going to, this is the new direct, what we're going to implement. And I don't know the facts. I think they've done studies on it where I think 30% of people are happy for the change and receptive to it, want change and like it, and about 30% are sort of indifferent. And then there's also an element of, percentage that they won't want to come with you on the journey. It's just not what they want to do, and they don't want to be receptive to change, and will either need to accept it or they move on to something else. And I think when you're going through a period of rapid change, and that's inevitable with business nowadays, you need to change to adapt to stay relevant. Um, but there is some that won't come with you, and some that will lead the change, and some that are indifferent about it. So everyone's a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. It brings up an interesting concept in my head, which is that we all feel like human beings as an animal are resistant to change. So when there's like we can't kid ourselves into thinking that the people that are excited about a change or willing to change, that they don't still feel some of those like physical nervous reactions to things getting different. They might know and they might know that it's good and be looking forward to it, but that doesn't mean
Mm,
that in their minds and their bodies they're not still resistant. They're just pushing back on it. They're
mhm.
willing to go anyway.
Yeah, and maybe they're trying to escape saying they're not enjoying now. So any change, you're looking at it as a positive, even though there's some nervousness around it.
Yeah, and really we see like that's a lot of what we're doing in coaching, right? Is
Mm.
this is especially at the with adults at the university level, semi-pro or pro. It's I've done it this way and it's taken me this far. So why should I switch? Why should I do
Yeah,
anything different?
yeah,
I'm here,
yeah.
and you're telling me that this other way of doing it is somehow going to be better than what got me here. Do you have experiences with that?
Yeah, I do. I guess that's not the approach I take, and I probably because of the fact I've failed at a few things, and then gone back and refocused on what it was or what I need to do, and gone on and beyond what it was before. And so because I look at that, if you tell me something I need to do because I'm not doing it right, I try and be fairly receptive to that and try and learn from it rather than shutting down and saying, no, no, I'm already, I've achieved, I don't need to do it. So personally, I'll try and take advice on board, and I'll ask for advice. Look, did that go well? Was something we should have done? What are the things we missed, or what wasn't successful? And try and pick up on those things as much as what was good about it, and learn from it. So I'm sort of very open to getting criticism because I think it's important to, you need that to grow, right? If everything was perfect, you wouldn't be growing at all. So I look for where, if I was a athlete today too, what is my technique? What's not right about it? I remember I was a swimmer and I was pretty good at swimming, but my kick wasn't a proper kick. It was like a rotation, which is more a long distance swimmer, which you don't, and kicking might only be 5 or 10%, but that's a lot of improvement in swimming where you're talking, inches.
Yeah.
And I just look back to why my coaches picked that up. That's a flaw in your stroke. You should be doing the 6B kick or an 8B kick or whatever it needs to be. So in some ways, looking back, they're things that I should have got for more criticism because that would have helped me improve. And they're the things that you need someone who's a coach is not just going to give you all the positives. You want someone who's going to be a bit of critique as well and say, look, you're not doing this right. Your presentations are sloppy, or this is wrong, or you're not whatever it is in business or sport. You want that criticism because you're going to use that to get better. That's how I've always seen it. So that's my personal opinion. I definitely know staff where it's been the opposite. They just don't want to hear it, and any criticism is a personal attack on them, and they just shut up and they become defensive or abusive. And so, yeah, not everyone has the same approach to it.
Yeah, and it kind of comes back to that concept of, are you trying to win, or are you actually trying to take something away from this and get better? And
Yeah.
it reminds me of we recorded another episode with a man in America. His name's Matthew Dix, and he's a teacher, but he's also a professional storyteller. But if you ever have a chance to look him up,
Okay.
and his episode is going to come out in the next couple of weeks on here as well. But he's um, he's he's almost like the Dos Equis guy. Like, he's the most interesting man I've
Yeah.
ever experienced, and he has, that's probably why he's such a good storyteller now. But he also comes from a background and a childhood and of extreme amounts of challenge, whether it's poverty or neglect or anything like that. And because of that, he's incredibly blunt, and he's very skillful at being able to be blunt, whether it's with children or adults, and giving criticism that is going to help them.
Hmm.
And he's also incredibly good at really taking in information, processing it, and then reacting, but never skipping the step.
Hmm.
And I think that that's really the part that you learn as a skill, whether it's in sport or whether it's from negative situations or something like that. But you start to realize that if I always just react with my emotions first, and let my hormones and my brain and my body take me over in this situation, I'm not going to get
Yeah.
anything out of it.
Yeah. I get that. I've seen that I've experienced it too, even in business. It might be emails you receive, and the gut reaction is just to fire something back or to ring someone, but you got to actually process it. I think you're right. There's a step in that, and you got to sort of receive it, analyze it, process it, and then respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to give any piece of advice to someone who self-identifies as being a poor communicator, or actually, I'll make that a little bit more narrow. If somebody were really poor at having tough conversations, so whether it's like any conversation that they know they have to have, but they really don't want to.
Mm.
Do you have any advice on how to approach that for them, before the conversation even happens? Just how to get ready to do it and actually do it.
Yeah. My advice would be have a time to think about when you're going to do it. So don't, because otherwise you're going to worry unnecessary. So whether if you're going to if you so know when you plan to do this, to have this conversation, and don't delay it too long. I try not procrastinate with things. If I have a difficult conversation, I'd rather have it, get it over and done with, and move on. Otherwise, you'll spend a wasted amount of time just going over and over and over it. But you need to have time to plan for it, and what are the outcomes going to be, and how you're going to approach it. So you might have a process you're going to go through to have that awful or difficult conversation. You know it's going to be hard, and then okay, I'm going to have that, whether it be at 3 o'clock this afternoon or whatever it is. Um, I wouldn't overthink it too. I normally, these are the things I need to cover off. These are the points I need to make, and these are the decisions that we need to come away with and whether. So then the issue is, okay, setting aside the time, bring the person in, and I think it's almost getting on with it. I really think procrastination is a real waste of energy and resource, and you just waste so much time overthinking things, and then you're not as productive because that's on your mind. You're weighing all these things you have to do. I've got to do this. I've still got to have that awful conversation. I think there's no substitute for getting in and doing it. I mean, I'm not saying don't prepare for it, but if something needs to be, okay, I'm going to have to do that now. I need to cover off this, and this, and then get on the phone or have a meeting and have that conversation sooner rather than later. I think it's important. If there's stuff that you don't have, and it might be too to help, I compartmentalize things. I think about it. So if I have to have a conversation with someone about A, B, and C, but I need a bit of information before I can have that, I'll just wait and I'll make sure I got all the facts right, get the information, and then go and have the conversation rather than going off. I don't know if they use the same terminology, but half cocked. You got to make sure you got all your facts and all your ducks in a row, sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
but don't dwell, don't procrastinate.
Yeah. Cool. And don't worry, that's far from the worst thing that anybody said on the show. It's
I know just with my daughter in Canada, there's certain terminologies we use or phrases that don't make any sense in Canada. So
yeah, no, we definitely had a few conversations, her and I, where I'd have to circle back around to a certain phrase or something like that to make
yeah,
sure I fully understood.
yeah.
Um, before I kind of wrap up here, I'm curious. I have a bunch of curious things that aren't necessarily a fit for the podcast that I have to ask, that I want to ask you, um, that I'll just have to do another time when we can maybe meet and have a beer or something. I'll have to come
Yeah.
to Australia, but it's I'm curious about where you've been in the world that was like your number one most interesting spot and why.
Uh, yeah, I have so many different places. I mean, I'll just give you a couple at the top of my head. I go there a lot. I like China for some of their customs and traditions, particularly around their hierarchy of bosses and workers and who sits where and who does what. I like India, just the chaos and how it works. I like Japan, and some of their cultural things are so just different, a different world. I found Russia sort of intimidating, but also fascinating. Um, South America is sort of just the sun and just the sort of the landscape, just so so dramatic, I guess. So I don't have one. In places like Cook Islands and even Bali and that, which is on our doorstep, are so tranquil and relaxed and sun. Like they all have different images and different emotions for me. I don't have one favourite place that I could sort of say this is it. But I find them all have different aspects, which I find I love. Yeah.
Have you been on, except for the Arctic or Antarctica, have you been on every continent?
No, I haven't been to Africa,
No,
so it's on my list to go. Yeah, yeah.
that's awesome.
I want to do Kilimanjaro and obviously the pyramids and those sort of things. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
You said something there too, and I love it. I'm going to try and wrap my head around this after we get off the call, and what it kind of makes me think of a little bit more is you talked about in India the chaos and how it works, and I think
yeah,
that's I haven't been to India, but I have been to China, and especially the traffic in China
yeah,
really is very much that, where it looks, especially to us coming from countries with less population, it looks like mayhem and 95 near misses every 2 seconds, and
yeah.
but it very much does work. And I think, and maybe I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. I think that's actually a pretty good lesson. And I'm just kind of riffing right now, but I think it's a pretty good lesson, just in the sense that at some point that would have felt chaotic to them too, but they've
Mm.
adapted and they've grown, and now the chaos that we see or feel in the moment is actually still safe and not that dangerous, though it at one time did feel that. They've learned and grown and progressed to a point where it's not so intimidating. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do. An analogy comes to mind actually. If you there's a couple of YouTube things you could see, and one's the lunch delivery system in India, and all the little
Right.
boxes that get delivered to all the three little workers all throughout the community, and it's just fascinating how that works. And like you're right, they grow up with that chaos and they accept it. It's a bit like young people born today. They grow up just expecting the internet and mobile phones and things. Just that's just how it is. And no need to explain how a mobile phone works. People just expect it to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's probably I don't have any more insights, but I can certainly relate to what you're saying. And we've come from a society, and that's probably why it is fascinating going to different countries, because they have a different world, different system. Um, I love, enjoy doing that and experiencing those things. But yeah, that lunchbox thing in India is a great example of what you're talking about, the chaos, and it's just normal how it works.
Yeah, and I'm so jealous in the sense that I'm a big believer that not traveling, or and I know not everybody has the opportunity, but not being able to see as many cultures as possible is no different than being colorblind, where you only see black or white, or you only see a limited number of the colors, and it's unfortunate, I think, because I think a lot, and this will be the last kind of super deep question, I guess, that I ask,
Yeah,
but I think a lot, in my opinion, of the world's problems will be solved if we were willing more people were willing to get those kind of same experiences that you have.
yeah, I agree. I think that's empathy. You understand person's perspective and where they're coming from with it, and then you lose that hostility, because it might be why they're reacting the way they are. But if you know their background to it, then it makes sense why they're the way they are. And it's understanding their position, where they're coming from. I think that's a key thing to communication in life. And once you do that, then your approach will vary according to according to them. That's how I found in business and in life, just generally. Yeah. So I don't know what it is. The word might be just having an empathetic approach to dealing with different customers and people and understanding their perspective, even in your own culture, I guess. But that's a key to life. Yeah.
That's friggin' cool. I usually wrap up with one question, but before I get to that question, is there anywhere, and this might, I honestly don't know where you are on this, so I'm going to be writing it down too. Is there anywhere that people can follow you or see what you're doing, or are you a big Instagram guy?
No, I'm not. I sort of I don't shy away from social media. I use it to keep connecting with my family and that. But no, there's not.
No.
Yeah.
And
Through you.
Well, we're in the process of trying to hire somebody to be our permanent marketing and social media manager, because it drives me absolutely crazy. But it's a part of the world now, especially in a smaller company.
Yeah, certainly.
The last question I ask everybody is just if you were to give some advice or articulate a really clear concept of how to learn at your best, or how to grow or gain as much from life as possible in a phrase or two, what would that be?
I would probably study successful people who are doing that now. And you're talking about social media. There's a plethora of information out there now, and I look at I love podcasts nowadays. There's a lot of great people you can listen to, and people that interview other great leaders, and they're probably some of the best, because then you get a wide range of people you can listen to and experiences from, and I find that fascinating. So I think that, through life you can learn through people you meet, books you read, and people you listen to, and places you go and travel. But I find that something we can all do, and it's free, and you can get access to some of the great leaders around the world. Just listen to podcasts and some of the great interviews that are done. That's what I love doing. I think it's probably a good bit of advice for someone who wants to learn, then mirror those people that have done the things that you want to do.
That's awesome. And now you're one of those people. You're one of those people on one of those podcasts that
Yeah, well,
I really appreciate the time, and I in our initial conversation, I know you felt a little bit like you didn't know what you would talk about on here, but the stuff that you gave, I've got tons of notes, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that listen or watch this, and they're going to be able to take something from it, and it's a lot of the value in what you're offering is that you're practicing it and utilizing that every day. So I thank you a lot for that.
No, thanks, Ken. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks. Take care.
See ya.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.